So, what do you think I'm talking about? You don't have to tell me. I just want you to think about it for a second. Think about your expectations going forward. I assume your initial thought would be a discussion about the status of Donkey Kong as a franchise, or rather lack thereof. Or maybe you're expecting a response to the questionably priced port of Donkey Kong Country Returns. Or maybe, just maybe, you hate Donkey Kong as a person and are wanting to find some sort of justification to further your hatred. Whatever it may be, it's not that. In fact, I'm not even really talking about Donkey Kong per se. No. I'm talking about Super Mario Odyssey. It might be surprising for some of you to learn that Super Mario Odyssey does, in fact, have its own lore. It's just that most of it is either found within the often grazed over brochures or in the Super Mario Odyssey official art book, the latter of which happens to contain a concise timeline of Mario games relevant to Odyssey. Now, I find this worthy of mentioning because while many Mario games will reference past entries, no Mario has really tried to put together a series of events that aligns most major and minor games of the franchise to fit a cohesive narrative. And the reason for that is if every developer of Mario was required to make every plotline, plot hole, contradiction, retcon, remake, and translation make sense, then they just make nonsense. So who the hell is this? You see, in Mario Odyssey, there are various 8-bit sections throughout the game, which at first seem to be nothing more than fun ways to break up the standard 3D gameplay. However, looking closer, we can find these 8-bit fossils within the Cascade Kingdom, and combining that with the fact that there's a Toad in the Mushroom Kingdom who has to see Mario in his old low-poly uniform from Mario 64, I am led to believe that in-universe graphics are portrayed as more of a fashion statement rather than an external byproduct of hardware limitations. This is to say, the Donkey Kong found during the New Donk City Festival is, in fact, Donkey Kong, as opposed to a digital recreation. But then the second question arises, which Donkey Kong is this? Because the modern DK is not the Donkey Kong from the original Donkey Kong arcade game. To quote the art of Super Mario Odyssey, Donkey Kong Country, a side-scrolling action-adventure with a new Donkey Kong who succeeds the now-aged original, dubbed Cranky Kong. This then indicates that the Kong who kidnapped Pauline back in the original Donkey Kong was none other than Cranky Kong. At least, at first. Thing is, Pauline's been kidnapped many a times, as just 13 years later in 1994, she'll be apprehended again in Donkey Kong for the Game Boy. And yes, while Donkey Kong 1981 and Donkey Kong 1994 share the same name, they are, very much, two distinct games. Donkey Kong 1994 is more of a spiritual sequel to the arcade game, as the gameplay's focus has shifted from platforming to puzzle solving. But it still retains classic elements like barrels, super hammers, and Donkey Kong Jr. Wait. Okay, no. This makes sense. So, in Donkey Kong 1994, Donkey Kong Jr. is said to be Donkey Kong's son. As previously established, the Donkey Kong from Donkey Kong 1981 will eventually become Cranky Kong in Donkey Kong Country. In Donkey Kong Country, the new Donkey Kong is said to be Cranky Kong's son. So the Donkey Kong from Donkey Kong 1981 and 1994 will become Cranky Kong, while Donkey Kong Jr. from Donkey Kong 1994 will become the modern Donkey Kong as seen in Donkey Kong Country. Still following? Cool. During the ending of Donkey Kong 1994, Mario shows Cranky Kong the error of his ways, and it looks like everyone seems to have made up. So we can deduce that if Pauline wanted to recreate the events of the original Donkey Kong for the new Donk City Festival, she probably wouldn't have a problem asking Cranky Kong if he'd like to participate. However, I don't believe that's him. You see, in Odyssey, Mario has a wide variety of outfits that he can wear. Most of these outfits change how he appears in not only the overworld, but also in the 8-bit portions of the game. While the sprites can lack certain physical features, the general look of the character is still maintained. And although Cranky Kong still talks big, he doesn't have quite the physique to match. The beard, the cane, the gray vest, the overall crinkly figure, the role of Donkey Kong doesn't quite fit him anymore. So, who else could replace him? But Donkey Kong. I mean, it just makes sense. Pauline would have known him back when he was DK Jr., and his schedule has been seeming pretty empty lately, so, I don't see why he wouldn't accept. Yet, something's not right. Our Donkey Kong wears a tie and spots a full head of hair, but this one's in nothing but his chrome dome and skin. It's not like he needed to change for the festival. Even his dad wore a tie at some point. Well, what if I told you there's still an unaccounted for Kong in this lineage? That's right! Released after Donkey Kong Country comes Mario Tennis. Even though Diddy Kong had been firmly established as Donkey Kong's sidekick by this point, he was replaced in favor of the fresh new DK Jr. Nope, not the DK Jr. from Donkey Kong 1994, because that one became the Donkey Kong from Donkey Kong Country. And the Donkey Kong from Donkey Kong Country is clearly the same Donkey Kong as seen in Mario Tennis. So the Donkey Kong Jr. in this game cannot be the same one as in previous games, meaning that the Donkey Kong Jr. from Mario Tennis has to be the son and or / nephew of the modern Donkey Kong from Donkey Kong Country. Although unlike his dad / uncle, but just like his grandfather, Donkey Kong Jr. is tieless and bald. And based off of the fact that Cranky Kong is now lying back in his rocking chair while Mario is still accelerating at terminal velocities, we can safely assume that Kong's age a bit faster than humans do. Not to mention, timeline-wise, the last point Pauline would have seen Donkey Kong would have been in Mario vs. Donkey Kong 2 March of the Minis, a game that takes place before Pauline becomes the mayor of New Donk City, leaving enough time for a successor of the successor of Donkey Kong to emerge. Think about it. This DK doesn't have the bearing of friends like the Donkey Kong before him, nor does he show any ounce of originality in his soul. He's already got the DK in his name. He'd be the perfect person to fulfill the role of anyone but himself. And I bet he'd do it at half the cost. So I guess in the end this was all a weird roundabout way of saying that the Donkey Kong from Super Mario Odyssey was in fact Donkey Kong to a certain extent. But that's just a theory. A really pointless theory. Come on, you don't even see the sprite for more than 2 minutes in the game.